All right, so ever since the Epstein files have been released, I've been hearing this term being used when referring to the victims and the survivors, and that term is prostitution. And why this is somewhat disturbing is just because of how it feels like they're being re victimized, as if to blame them for being trafficked. And most of the time, I'm hearing the perpetrators in these crimes using those terms, but sometimes it's also the media kind of try to downplay it by calling it prostitution and by calling those girls or boys prostitutes. And in my experience, I've had situations where I've been solicited at least 3 times, and these were all when I was a child. So the first time this happened, I was 4 or 5 years old and with a bunch of my cousins, and my older cousins were supposed to be watching me and the other younger kids, but they were too busy playing and they didn't even notice what was happening. And I had an older boy just come up to me, and I felt like I was trapped, like I couldn't get away. Um, but basically, he was trying to give me candy and making all these really convincing arguments why I should trade him this candy. And what he was wanting to trade was that either I touched him or he touched me. Um, and I had kind of a recollection that he also might have been exposing himself or whatever. But at the time, I was like 4 or 5 years old. Like, I didn't know anything about what was being proposed. I just felt stressed and scared and was wondering where my cousins were and how I could get away. And it felt like an extraordinary amount of time that I was kind of trying to argue with this kid, and he was probably a teenager, um, but just making these arguments that my parents didn't allow me to have candy or didn't allow me to accept candy from strangers, and he tried to say that he wasn't a stranger, he was just another kid or whatever. But yeah, that argument went on until I finally got away and got to my cousins. I don't remember if I ever shared that with anyone. I probably did, but that was definitely pretty scary. The second time, I was 17, and I had a pretty sheltered upbringing, but um, when I was a teenager, I was living with a variety of different relatives. And at this time, I was living with a relative that was being trafficked. And I didn't really know this at the time. This female relative was being trafficked, but it was her spouse who was doing it. And the way I found out that this was happening was that somebody came in the middle of the night, some strange man, and I was hearing argument at the front door. And they were arguing for some time, and they told me the next day that um, he was upset because he wanted to purchase me. So that was pretty scary. And, again, I was just a teenager sleeping, trying to sleep, um, and not knowing anything about that someone was trying to purchase me, right? And the last time it happened, I was also 17, and this time it happened right in front of my face. Again, with the relative, the female relative that was being trafficked. a man she was associating with, um, like, asked if he could purchase me. And, they said no. And he tried to convince them, and they said, absolutely not. And again, I was just like, what the hell? Like, what is that? So, in all three instances, I escaped the situation, but the reason I escaped it was either because I had somebody there to defend me, or I managed to defend myself. Um, and I know that not everyone that ends up being trafficked has that they had, or have somebody that defends them or tries to get them out of the situation, or that they were able to get out of the situation themselves. So when I hear these people calling these girls prostitutes and um, really trying to write it off as something that they did, to me, I'm just wondering, like, um, were they actual prostitutes, right? And does that word actually exist, or should it exist? Or were they trafficked? And are they being basically blamed by using that word, um, blamed for their trafficking, blamed that they didn't have somebody to defend them, or that they weren't able to defend themselves?